Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. We may not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So it was some weeks ago that I selected a topic, which didn't, of course, come up last week because we had cancelled last week. But the subject is Holy Well of Inspiration. It's a broad enough topic because where we sit here in our Vedanta society is in a general area that used to be a great area for pilgrimage. Not far from us, there are the ruins of a monastery that fell into decline in the 17th century. In 1615, it was a viable building, but then it went into decline, all of a sudden, for unknown reasons, over a 60-year period. It was a kind of monastic community, a convent actually, and they were dedicated to maintaining Marian shrines, that is, shrines dedicated to Our Lady. Our Lady, or Mother Mary, or of whatever term you like to call it, is a particular phenomena throughout the Western world. Not just the Western world, but other places also, South America and so on. And really, de facto, it is highlighting a motherhood of God, even though theology and what have you may mitigate against it. Still, in effect, it is that. There are huge Marian movements everywhere. In Ireland, there is a pilgrimage place called Knock. And so very near us is a small shrine to this Mary. And it is called Lady's Well. It dates back to pre-Christian times because all the holy wells throughout Ireland and Scotland and other places were all deemed to be sacred and holy. And when Christianity came in, they never disturbed everything. They created a kind of Celtic Christianity. And then they dedicated these wells. Most often, these wells are named or become significant because of various saints. Or they become the embodiment of nature in some form or another. But when we say nature, what we are talking about is that movement universally designed to push us toward perfection. And so in pre-Celtic times, or I should say pre-Christian times in the Celtic world, there was a great, great reverence for nature. The divinity of nature was clearly understood. It is reflected in the various names of the divine in feminine form. Bridget, we discovered the other week, was one of them. And she is dominating, or she is a goddess, if you will, of three streams. And so she's called triple goddess. There's Boan, the goddess of the river Boyne. And the river Boyne is a combination of the terms. It begins with Bo, means cow. And we can see how the Irish language is an Indo-European language. We can see how the Sanskrit equivalent, Go, is there for cow. But what does that symbolize? A cow symbolizes divine grace flowing. A cow freely gives us milk, dairy products. A kind of machine, you feed grass in one end and milk comes out the other. And so this flow of grace is symbolized as the cow. we have to use various symbols and signs. We have to use various representations of something that is intrinsically unseen. Unseen and in the normal course of events unknown, and yet nature itself becomes the very signature of this divine. It's expressed everywhere. We can easily trace it back, starting with an appreciation of its expressed beauty everywhere. And so this flow of a cow is there. It comes out in various rivers in India, for example, Godavari. So this is why, if you ask somebody, why do you think the cow is sacred? It's because it represents this divine grace, this motherly grace, the divinity flowing. Danu is a river goddess, and Liban is the water goddess, and Shinan is the goddess for the river that comes out as Shannon. So everywhere we find this concept of divine grace flowing in a loving way, in a transforming way, and in a feminine way, a motherly way. So we have this lady's well, dedicated to this lady. And for your information, it was a great, great area for pilgrimage. It was established, I think, by King Henry IV, or King Henry VI, I think it was, in about the 13th century. And that was surely built on a more ancient tradition. By the 18th, 19th century, it was a central place of pilgrimage for the whole of Dublin, where people came and took the waters as a solution to rheumatism. So this is Our Lady's Well that we are fortunate enough to be situated in, just up the road, within walking distance. So water flows by the action of divine grace, but it is these great saints that seek solitude in these holy places that ultimately become places of pilgrimage. It starts off with a search for this quietude, this silence, not in an isolated way completely, but amidst the beauty of nature. One such place near Dublin is called Glendalough, a place where there are two lakes. There was a great saint, Saint Kevin, who trekked over the mountains to find this beauty of these lakes and mountains combination. Seeking out a cave, he decided to live there in solitude. But after a while, of course, there's an inner urge that says, if you want to do something great for others, there has to be not just an individual component, but a community component. And so this very quickly developed into a monastic settlement. Monastic settlement means that there was a community built around it, something that benefits everybody. And typical in Ireland would be a bell tower, or a kind of long or tall tower. And archaeologists will tell us that it is served as a bell tower to call the community in the whole valley around. So when we look at this holy well, we are looking at, firstly, the representation of the flow of water where a spring arises, a gift of Mother Nature that leads us spontaneously to nature as an expression of something deeper. The intrinsic beauty and the internal lift that occurs whenever we see a beautiful scene is simply a tracing back to that area of perfection within us, which is, again, beauty. Described by mystics as bliss, joy, the peace that passeth all understanding. All these various terms are there to describe the homely place in which we dwell. And we can also have a pun in English because the well, and when we think of the water and the flow of the water and nature's natural gift to us, where we can drink fresh from the spring, it reminds us, of course, of the welling up of our own emotions when we tune into this. When we coordinate all our feelings and our emotions and our thoughts with that, something within us also rises up and wells within us. Why should we bother to have places of pilgrimage? Because we require 1,000 tools for our internal journey to discover our own inner perfection. And that requires dedication. Dedication, the word is a remarkable term. We know, of course, that our own sister Nivedita is, of course, called a dedicated one. But this word suggests a high ideal, a noble cause, or a worthy goal. The human heart inwardly seeks something of a nobler order. And it shows the necessity for the elimination of the non-essentials, mobilizing every available unit of energy toward a cause. And employing all this energy systematically along a chosen route or a chosen path. We know what's involved when we are dedicated, for example, to art or national welfare. We want to create a cultural center. Then a number of different components must be there. First of all, we have to get all information necessary for it. And then we have to do some planning work. We have to give some thought to it. And then finally, we have to have persistence, vigilance, mounting enthusiasm to sustain it all. We must progressively bring out our desired developments from within. So to facilitate progress at each stage, we can wisely use various symbols. We can use symbols, mottos, periodic group meetings, festivals, zeal-promoting literature, even specially designed flags to inspire the public. And we can see all these components that are assembled in organized pilgrimages, where the journey reminds us of our own overall pilgrim journey, so that people from all over would have come to this well, not just for water to cure rheumatism, but as a great, great devotion. We are told in the historical annals that people used to approach this well on their knees. Imagine. Of course, some people will do this because they want some kind of effect. Same thing with the great pilgrimage place of Lourdes. There are some people who simply go out of pure devotion because some miraculous thing happened there. Some vision occurred there and created a special place, a special vibration. But other pilgrims will come in wheelchairs and many physical ailments and conditions for cures. Whether they get cured or not, we don't know. But one thing we do know, that there's an internal miracle that should happen. Regardless of whether you come for a reward or you come simply out of pure devotion, this internal well comes up and overflows. And when that happens, of course, the physical body can respond, because you can't separate the vital vibration of every thought and intention and feeling from every cell of the body. Every cell of the body will vibrate with it. And the more you sustain it, the more that vibration will occur. And ultimately, when a transformation occurs, we call this spiritual healing. Spiritual healing meaning, all right, supposing you're able to conduct your life limping along, but the background is one of doubt, one of fear, one of tremor, one of suspicion, one of hatred, jealousy, pride, all of these negative emotions. It would be no surprise, surely, for the heart to fail, or the liver to fail, or the stomach to reject the food that is fed in, Supposing I make the order of my day anger, then every time I eat something, the subservient stomach will say, the order of the day on today's emotional menu is anger. Let me be angry with this food and reject it. And indigestion occurs. Some people have terrible skin problems, an irritated skin, because they have an irritable nature. You can't avoid it. You can't separate the physical from the psychological. And you can't separate the psychological from the influx of all kinds of thoughts and feelings. And they arrive so spontaneously. So we need to train the mind in various ways. And taking advantage of every offering that nature has to give is a very, very wonderful way. First, we have to observe what is going on. Mostly we take it for granted. We can pass any tree or flower and dismiss it. Mere tree, mere flower. A certain miracle occurred in the last few days here, because looking out of the window, all of a sudden, almost overnight, whole rows of daffodils appeared on the green in front of us. As far as I'm aware, nobody went and planted this. Nature herself decided to give us this display. But there are other people who may not have noticed this. They may have walked past because their mind would have been occupied in trying to catch the bus or in trying to plan out what are the day's activities. Who do we have to deal with? What various difficulties and challenges will we face in the day? And a certain self-doubt, will we be able to deal with them and overcome them? And as long as the mind is occupied in this way, we miss the intrinsic beauty that nature has to offer, the free gifts. And even if we are caught in a cell or a cave where there is no sight or sound that indicates this intrinsic beauty and glory, we are left with the beauty and glory of the body itself. We take it for granted that food gets digested. We take it for granted that cells get renewed. We take it for granted that the heart pumps and the blood circulates. We take it for granted that the eye can see an arrangement that draws in and absorbs photons and converts it into some understanding that the brain interprets. All these experiences we take for granted. We take for granted breathing. We take for granted the movement up and down of the piston, they call the diaphragm muscle. We take it for granted that air is available for us to breathe. We take it for granted that the sun will shine. We take it for granted that the stars will shine at night. That when we look into space, we see that infinite vastness. But man all along has wondered. Maybe our wonder has been lost to a great extent. Maybe we have stopped wondering. Maybe we've said, no, we know all those answers. But actually that wouldn't be the case. If curiosity stops, then science stops. And science is ongoing. Now today in modern science, there are much more questions than there are answers. Despite the great, great advances in modern technology, despite the increased knowledge that we have of our environment and surroundings, we have managed to deliberately upset our environment. And now we are faced with a number of different problems. How will we solve this? Instead of having a model that explains simply what we see in our overall cosmic environment, we have inserted into our model 75% unknown stuff called dark energy, and about 24% or so dark matter. And all we are seeing is a mere 4 or 5% of the overall model. This is the current thinking. So if this curiosity draws a line and says, and we shrug the shoulders and say, we'll accept things as they are, then we won't really unfold our knowledge. And knowledge of the environment of the world is important. But much more important, much more significant, is a higher knowledge, a knowledge of our own deep internal self, the internal well, if you like, which is deep, which sits within us, which is accessible if we have the intention and the will to draw our minds inward in investigative mode and uncover the various layers, one after the other, in an adventure of what we call generally yoga, comprising of mindfulness in every activity, comprising of discernment in all events, and comprising an equilibrium and concentration meditation, and comprising a dedication of the heart toward the heart of hearts that religion happens to call God, that divine unknown, infinite, invisible, that exhibits itself as nature. And it all leads back then. We can take out the manifested nature that we can easily pick up and see and appreciate. But we first have to observe it. And in order to do that, we have to set aside all the other superfluous things that turn out to be, in the grand scheme, in contrast to our overall purpose, as mere trivial pursuit. The mind, as long as the mind is occupied with this trivia that goes hand in hand with negativity, as long as that's happening, then we are postponing our central purpose, our central investigation into the internal world. And so all of this becomes a nice diversion. And today we are not short of diversions. Today, the media that we are involved in, the technology that we use, that even a child can use with much more efficiency than an adult now. We learn to occupy a child's mind with visual things, audio things. And this has the effect very often of making the child insular and withdrawn, maybe even in some cases antisocial. We should surely take this child and say, why don't you see? Every child loves to climb a tree. Every child can appreciate the transformation that occurs in summer, where yellow flowers are there. In this part of the world, it's a wonder. And nature provides the bright color of yellow everywhere. All the flowers are all yellow in the summer, indicating an element of brightness. There must be a compatibility with our mood to say, yes, it is all bright, it is all happy, we can appreciate it. And we can do it in a multisensory way. Observation is not just visual, it is also to do with all the sounds around, to do with all the sights around. And when we truly observe all these things, this feeling wells up inside us of deep appreciation, and then a spontaneous feeling of thankfulness. What we call worship is this thankfulness. There's nothing else except thankfulness in worship. Of course, there are various other forms of worship. Just as people who go to Lourdes will want to get some kind of effect or some kind of reward, some kind of change, some transformation, some healing. I was speaking to somebody today. I have a lot of physical difficulties, they said, and a lot of disturbance of the mind. And yet I'm saying my japa, but it doesn't have any effect. Well, why are you saying your mantra in order to get an effect? It is counterproductive. Because every movement that says I want is also accompanied by I haven't got, a dissatisfaction. Why don't you repeat lovingly this sacred name with deep feeling of observing the internal nature, this life energy that we call divine or divinity, this infinite invisible, this pure cosmic vitality. And why don't you appreciate its deep, deep beauty? And then why don't you feel this element of thankfulness with these preceding elements in place? What will happen to the cells of the body if you perpetually think along those lines? If you repeatedly, systematically direct your mind in this way, shifting it to blissful base every time, whatever is presented, you shift it progressively to blissful base. This ultimately is what we call meditation. But we can do it with eyes open. We can do it walking, we can do it working, we can do it in any context. We do it in a specific way when we sit for formal meditation. But formal meditation is not possible unless we're able to have some self-control of all our thoughts and intentions in our waking life. So dedication is required. This element of dedication, just as we can use this dedication in fulfilling any scheme that we have, noble or otherwise. Any spiritual institution that is dedicated to this would have to have the same components. It'll have to have some center for learning. And there are two approaches in the spiritual life. One we might call the Vedantic approach. The Vedantic approach will be to teach us the principles. There will be so many terms that are used. We can call this Vedantic approach a way of explaining all the various steps necessary to get a comprehensive understanding of some important technical terms that we find in our scriptural area. Such technical terms as life energy or prana, mind or manasa, intellect, buddhi, egoism, ahankara, spirit, atman, inner controller, antaryam, nature, prakriti. And by nature, as I say, we mean here that infinite storehouse from which all bodies and minds come into manifestation. And that assists them to evolve toward perfection, and which finally withdraws them. And to get a coherent picture of what such terms hint at the different scriptures have to be studied, of course, diligently. And then, in order to do this, a competent teacher has to be present. This assistance is necessary, just as every science invariably requires the same things. Study includes serious and methodical application of one's own reasoning until a satisfactory outlook emerges. Equipped with this, we now have to go on to a more direct method. A second approach. It consists of graded disciplines leading to a direct apprehension of this supreme reality within us. And by comparison with this, the first one is purely intellectual, purely abstract, purely theoretical. It is not direct awareness. Direct awareness is necessary. All the mental counterparts of our physical instruments, eyes, ears, all of these things that we use, they can all be fully mobilized. They can be swung into a luminous and thankfully sustained rapture or a welling up of feelings. This totality uplifted, harmoniously and benignly presiding aspect of our existence is in effect what we might call our yoga or our spiritual union with the divine. And what is that divine? It is the divine background of all beings. And all the elements in the universe, its glory and transforming power naturally expresses itself in all activities of daily life. You cannot move without this. Every movement is an expression of it, of this divine glory manifest. And it applies to everybody because it's expressing itself in daily life. In short, a person who has found this and tuned into this, in scriptural terms, becomes what we call moksha, liberated. Liberated not in a post-mortem condition, but in this very life. This can happen to anybody. can happen to men, to women. It can happen to a child even, irrespective of race, creed, or occupation. Indeed, it's our duty and privilege to become established in this higher or this highest of all goals. In order to assist in this arrangement, naturally we have to have facilities. Just as in any form of study, a good library is necessary, with arrangements for teachers and students. And this is what we call an ashram. If we use it properly and our attitudes are regulated and harmonized easily, we can do it through a shared life, which we can call a spiritual life that is mutually supporting, a kind of family, a kind of brotherhood, if you will. And this is really what we call the communities of religions. A final revelation can arise only after unbroken internal experiments can be undertaken. That's also what we call spiritual life. It has to be done by each aspirant, but it has to be done in the context of community also. So to facilitate such disciplines for people, either working alone or sitting in groups, there must be a properly furnished shrine for meditation. There must be holy wells. There must be places of pilgrimage. There must be ashrams. There must be scripture. There must be competent teachers. There must be all of these things and more. What happens when we go on a pilgrimage? We make a whole series of memories, wonderful memories, that we can replay at any given moment. Supposing we are taking a trip on an aircraft. Supposing we go at that altitude which is above the clouds and above all eras, all weather, and we see an ocean of billowing clouds in front of us. And the mind then naturally goes toward the sun which is there shining and the blue sky. The beauty of the scene will capture us beautifully. And we can think, is this not also something like a meditation where the mind can soar above the normal daily things of life that bog us down in a materialistic and reductionist way of thinking? And so all philosophical systems have these ample provisions for creative imagination. It is through this imagination that we're able to facilitate this. It is this imagination that imagines an internal space in the heart, and earlier we conducted a meditation emphasizing this. It's not a literal space. It's a space that is there so that we can conceive of the inconceivable. We can think of a sacred space, lit as it were by the light of a million suns, and make that our blissful base. We can imagine there how from there our most significant symbol or person can emerge. We can rally around our emotions using the full faculty of our imagination and using all the various gifts, free gifts that are given to us, such as holy wells, holy rivers, holy mountains, holy company, holy ashrams. So it is on this principle that various symbols and images and diagrams and shrines and places of pilgrimage and areas where there are obviously benign vibrations and atmospheres. It is not by chance that the great mythological stories of India are placed in forests, hermitages, surrounded by mountains, surrounded by trees and flowers and rivers and animals. Something like a Walt Disney picture, where the sky is bluer than blue, where the grass is greener than green, where the flowers are vibrantly painted colors. We have the capacity to imagine all of this and use these great symbols and manage to contemplate what is their deeper meaning to do with flow. So let us see how these sacred places arise. Firstly, an internal desire for individual solitude, finding a sacred place. The second movement then is, can I then share this with others? Can I rally around with a spirit of generosity and service others and give them the same kinds of opportunities? And so pilgrimage places come into being. And if you want to associate them with holy water that can remove rheumatism, so be it. At least that motive is better than no motive whatsoever, or ignoring the place completely. But soon we'll come to a realization that it's all leading to an area of fullness, where there are no gaps, there are no defects, there are no deficiencies. And then all our pilgrimage becomes a way of allowing the mind to soar to nobler heights. So with these small comments in mind, I've left some time now for this interaction that I promised you. And you'll all be quiet, I'm sure, by now. So I hope that there will be good interaction. I'm going to mute my microphone with a view to interaction.
The first thing is, I hope your health is better, Swamiji.
Yes.
I know you haven't been well.
Yeah.
All our prayers and good wishes are with you.
So, of course, the idea of sickness is with us during pandemics such as the COVID and so on. And everybody has been affected in some way or other, no doubt. But then, can we use that also in spiritual life? You see, we have two choices. We can allow the whole physical condition to drag us down, drag our whole mood down. Or we can accept it with a sense of forbearance. What cannot be cured has to be endured. And we patiently accept it, using it as an opportunity to appreciate the wonder of a healing body. It's not the vaccination that's healing you. The vaccination is allowing an internal environment that promotes an immune system to combat anything. So the real curative faculty is the blood. Now let us see how we can trace it back to its origin. So the blood is also a flow. We were dealing with wells and water and so on. Well, the large composition of the human body is water. Without that, there's no flexibility in the body. And so the large composition of the blood will be water that allows a certain flow. In other words, we can't be rigid. That doesn't work. The machine works on lubrication. So the wonderful thing about the human body is the healthy body, not the sick body. Supposing we take this wonderful machine and we say it is equipped with antibodies. But even so, one teardrop is effective as a germ killer when it's diluted in a 20-liter bucket of water called Lysol. They use it in hospitals as a disinfectant. The skin itself is a germ killer. Your hand doesn't get attacked by germs and fall off, like somebody with leprosy. So the skin itself is an effective germ killer. And if any foreign material gets past the saliva, that acts as also a kind of disinfectant. And there are cilia that enable foreign material to be coughed up, to be trapped and eliminated. And the hydrochloric acid sits in the stomach. And even if things get past that, the body is inundated, as it were, with a whole army of antibodies. You test it out, you have a small cut on your skin. The whole body gets mobilized in terms of healing it. Within a short period of time, a small woven fabric is there, using the white blood cells, and the blood stops leaking, and the healing immediately commences. And then the body has all these mechanisms to eliminate toxic material, has a lymphatic system. The only way to move it around is through yoga exercise or bending, twisting, stretching. The heart is there, pumping all the time, oxygenating, teaching us a mechanism of how to work. It doesn't take a holiday, it pumps, it rests, it pumps, it rests intermittently. It's a peristaltic pump. So the wonder of the human body is not in the sickness. The wonder of the human body is in the health. And the whole mobilization of the body to restore health without any external use. As soon as you put a drug into the mouth, it is equivalent to so much lack of faith in the divine organization of the body. And we are impatient. We want some cure. But actually what we're doing is we're simply dealing with symptoms. So even a simple cold is a cure, because the body is dealing with it. That is why we get the symptoms. So even in the midst of COVID, there's a wonderful lesson, and the lesson is picked up by governments all over the world. I recently came across the idea that if you have COVID or have had COVID, then it's equivalent to a whole vaccination certificate, if you will, because it means that there's immunity has been built up in the human body. And as we gradually get back to normal, so-called, then most people will have gotten the virus just like flu has gotten. So in the beginning, of course, it was dangerous. Now the variants are becoming less and less and less, until the final variants will be very, very mild in terms of their symptoms. So I think we have to thank the COVID for a number of things, one of which is this broadcast on Zoom. It never occurred to us previously to have these broadcasts on YouTube and Zoom and all the rest of it, reaching a vast audience. The downside of it is that people attempted to remain in their hibernation and not come and take the advantage of what is the equivalent of a holy well. Yeah. It's no coincidence, really, that we have this ladies' well nearby, a holy well, and that this whole area is called Ladies' Well. The school opposite is called Ladies' Well School. And we have a painted picture on the window that we call Martin's window, actually, where we have Holy Well in the center, Ladies' Well there. Because there's a reason why all of these were made holy, starting with the deep, deep reverence for nature itself. And then the occurrence that nature is leading us toward a position of holiness. Because they could just have said, oh, a well is something that gives us water, thanks a lot. No, they went into it much deeper. They saw that it was a spiritual thing. Spiritual means that it's filled with the Spirit. A tree is filled with the Spirit. Water is filled with the Spirit. All right, so that was in response to a comment. So if there are no other further comments or questions, then we can leave it there. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace be unto all. Thank you.